Why do we eat chicken, but we don't eat cow meat? We call it beef. We don't eat pig meat. We call it pork. And we don't eat sheep meat. We call it mutton. So why is chicken just chicken? And the weirdest part? The answer has almost nothing to do with chickens. It has to do with who was eating them and who was serving them. To understand this, we have to travel back almost 1,000 years. Imagine England in the Middle Ages. There are two very different worlds living in the same country. One group works the land. They raise pigs, they raise cows, they raise sheep, and they speak Old English. So for them, a cow was a cow, a pig was a pig, a sheep was a sheep. Simple. But then something happened that completely changed the English language. In 1066, William the Conqueror and the Normans invaded England, and suddenly, the people ruling England spoke French. The people working the farms mostly spoke English, and this created one of the strangest situations in the history of the English language. The person raising the animal and the person eating the animal often didn't speak the same language. Think about a cow. The farmer raising it called it a cow, but when that animal eventually reached the table of the Norman aristocracy, the meat was called boeuf, a French word. Over time, English speakers transformed that French word into beef. Same animal, different word. The pig? The English farmer called it a pig, but the French-speaking upper class called the meat pork, which eventually became pork. And sheep? The animal was a sheep, but the meat became mutton. So, if French influenced the names of these meats, why didn't chicken become some fancy French word too? Here's where it gets interesting. Because chicken was different. Unlike cows, pigs, and sheep, chickens were relatively small. They could be raised by ordinary households. They didn't require enormous amounts of land, and they weren't as strongly associated with the large livestock economy of cattle and sheep. So the everyday English word chicken remained incredibly useful. And here's another important detail. The word chicken itself already referred to the bird. So unlike the cow-to-beef transformation, English never developed a completely separate everyday word for chicken meat. We simply kept saying chicken. But wait, if this is really about French influence, why don't we say veal for cow babies? And why is poultry completely different again? Because English didn't get these words from just one source. It became a linguistic Frankenstein. English is basically a giant mixture of languages. Old English gave us words like cow. French gave us beef. Old English gave us pig. French gave us pork. Old English gave us sheep. French gave us mutton. And for deer, the word venison came through Old French. So English ended up keeping two names for the same animal, one for the living creature and another for the food on your plate. And there's actually a social story hidden inside these words. The people raising the animals were generally lower on the social ladder. The people eating expensive meat were often the Norman aristocracy. So the language preserved a strange reminder of that medieval class divide. The farmer said, cow. The aristocrat's table said, beef. The farmer said, pig. The aristocrat's table said, pork. The farmer said, sheep. The aristocrat's table said, mutton. In a way, you can almost see medieval class structure inside an English menu. But here's something even stranger. This doesn't mean the Normans simply arrived and renamed every animal. That's not what happened. The language changed gradually. People from different social classes interacted for generations. French and English words mixed together. Some survived, some disappeared, some changed meaning. And eventually, the two languages helped create what we now call Middle English. And that's one of the reasons English became such a strange language. So finally, why do we say chicken instead of some special word like beef or pork? Because chicken never went through the same linguistic transformation. The everyday English word survived. The bird was chicken, and the meat was also chicken. There are other terms, of course, like poultry, but that's a broader category for domesticated birds, not simply a replacement word for chicken meat. So when you order chicken today, you're actually using a word that survived hundreds of years of linguistic change. And here's the coolest part. The next time you eat beef, pork, or mutton, you're not just eating meat. You're basically eating a tiny piece of English history, because those words are fossils. Fossils from a time when one group of people raised the animals, and another group ate them. And somehow, their languages ended up on the same dinner plate. That's why a cow can be a cow in the field, but beef on your plate. And chicken? Chicken just stayed chicken.